Competitive Fortnite had a lot of glitches, bugs, and exploits, some of which have been abused by the best of the best players. When you think of early bugs in Fortnite, your mind will probably go straight to Tfue, whether it was ghost peeking, phase editing, or the fast pickaxe exploit. However, these were before tournaments were really even a thing. The first major tournament really impacted by a massive bug, from my research, was Summer Skirmish Week 8. Now, if you've watched my coin flip video, this is the tournament where a participant in the final was decided based off of a literal coin flip. Iconic moment in Fortnite history right there. But in Game 6, there was actually an accidental low gravity bug. Now, there were consistent changes to the map, having low gravity areas all around this because of Kevin the Cube, but for some reason in this tournament, the low gravity effect seemed to either double or multiply on itself. So when players jumped through here, they were just flying about into the sky. The casters were losing their minds because it was very, very funny.
Okay, no matter what, this is hysterical. There's this low gravity field now.
I've seen this a couple times, like videos on Twitter and stuff.
Activate this?
I don't know if this is...
The players were incredibly frustrated because, I mean, yeah, this is not competitive whatsoever. And rather than canceling the game, they just added an additional one on. This is more than likely because there was a $25,000 bonus for winning a single game of this tournament. And I think Tendence, who won it, would have probably lost his mind had he had that money taken away from him. Unfortunately, once this tournament was over, it wouldn't take long for the next game-breaking bug to be found, and that is the slow glider. Now, I'm sure if you've played Fortnite for at least over a year, you're very familiar with this bug. However, all the way back in the fall skirmish, which followed the summer skirmish, Nate Hill actually got this bug whilst gliding and died because of it, which potentially cost him the win for the entire tournament.
Still number 2. How are you guys feeling after that?
We're feeling amazing, man. Like we had a lot of shit go on, like during the fall skirmish.
The problem with this bug is it just kept appearing throughout different seasons, and it was at its worst in Chapter 2, Season 3, where it was pretty much in for the entire season. It was pretty much all people complained about because they continually died out of the sky using the main mobility that the season had, and Booga also died to this in Qualifier 2, meaning that he did not win the event. Pads have had all kinds of weird bugs, like placing sideways, and sometimes they just don't work at all, but thankfully Slow Glide has been fixed, but fingers crossed we'll never see it again. But there were some exploits that pros took advantage of. This was something that only the most mechanical players at the time could really abuse and use, and it essentially allowed for a 100% safe peek. This exploit allowed you to edit a door, open it, and as it's opening, shoot the opponent, and there is zero chance that they can shoot you back. All you needed to do was edit the door and reload as it was opening and shoot at the same time, and this just allowed you to shoot through it. It took a long time for this to get patched, but once it was patched, rather than reloading, you could just emote. So you would edit, emote, and shoot, and the exact same bug would happen. Then again, once this was patched, a third option came in where you'd edit, reload, emote, and then shoot, and you'd still be able to shoot through the door. Now, because this kept getting patched and finding new methods over and over again, this bug was only finally removed during Chapter 2, so the best of the best players were abusing this for years. Now, throughout Chapter 1, a lot of the players' skill level was rising a lot, and this meant that playstyles developed with that too. And what most of the players ended up doing was stop W keying and get a lot more passive, which caused games to be much more stacked with many more players surviving to the end. Now, this caused an insane amount of lag at the time because the game just was not designed to have this many players alive at that moment. Whilst doing a performance evaluation test in some scrims, this iconic clip happened because of how laggy it was.
Stop! Help! What is going on?
Bang! 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 Bang!
What the?
Bang! 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 Bang!
But only 1 month later, there would be the ESL Katowice Royale in Poland. Now, this happened just during the start of Season 8, and as the players were flying over from NA, Epic Games just decided to change the top right corner of the map to be the new pirate theme, so they lost pretty much all of their drop spots, had no idea what was going on, they didn't have time to test the new season, the new items, the new map, they just basically got their whole drop spot eradicated. Now, not a bug, but very funny thing to mention, but this tournament had 2 major bugs in it, and the first one was an invincibility bug. Heretic's marquee was knocked, but somehow became completely invincible on the ground. You can see he tries to get finished by Shinken, and his HP goes all the way down to 0, but he just doesn't die. His teammate Ryox then is able to actually revive him, and then they're able to win the fight off spawn against Shinken and Stompy. Later, officials did have to force him to die into Storm to this bug, and I mean, they placed 48th, so they were not doing very well anyway. anyway, but this probably impacted Stompy and Shinken, who were there fighting off spawn, as they ended up placing 12th, whereas if they'd managed to win this off spawn, which they should have because it was a 2v1 situation, they probably could have got enough points to move up 2 or 3 places on the leaderboard and more than likely missed out on around $8,000. The second major bug at this tournament was the cannons. Now I'm just going to play this clip.
No co jest? Nie, 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 nie!
Bad word. This same season, there's clips from both Tfue and Ninja doing pretty much the exact same thing, and swimming wasn't in Chapter 1, so it's not like you could go and grab the reboot card. The games were just completely over at this point. Now, the problem with cannons is that these bugs continued even into Chapter 3 when they were reintroduced. Sometimes if you'd fire yourself through a cannon, you would just die to fall damage. I think in this particular clip they're watching, it's because the player flew through a bush and then that caused fall damage. But it's always funny to see a bug ruin people's tournaments through multiple chapters. Also during the World Cup qualifiers, we had the notorious rift bug. Now what you could do here was essentially shake a portal rift or just do this with a regular rift as well. And if you emoted as you started to fall through the sky, you would cancel the flip animation and you'd pull out your weapon, which actually allowed you to shoot the players that you were flying with. How much impact this had in tournaments was questionable, but Andrea did use this during the World Cup qualifiers. Now luckily there weren't that many bugs during the World Cup itself. However, in the following season, everyone's favorite season, Season X, there was a fantastic bug where the mechs just randomly turned invisible for a while. Now, this impacted one kill race tournament, a Friday Fortnite that Mongrel played. However, they ended up actually still winning, so it pretty much had almost no effect competitively, but was pretty funny. But during this season was a much darker bug that could have been exploited for a long time without players knowing about it. And this was aim assist on keyboard and mouse. Now at the time, Epic were changing the aim assist settings off of what was now called Legacy to having linear and exponential settings. If while playing keyboard and mouse, you also plugged in a controller and started a little bit of stick drift on one of the sticks, this would actually give you aim assist because it thought that you were a controller player even though your main input at the time was mouse and keyboard. It's unsure how long this was in the game for and if there were any ways to do this prior to the setting being implemented, but it does make you wonder if people were able to do something like this during the World Cup qualifiers. And an honorable mention, even though this in no way impacted any tournaments, but it goes out to the Star Wand bug. For some reason, this pickaxe did 54 body shot damage and 80 to the head. Not sure how that happened, but luckily it was patched and wasn't in any tournaments. But this wasn't the only pickaxe with an exploit. In Chapter 2, Fortnite released the Riot Control Baton. Now this item was originally released on the 13th of December 2019, but no one realized this was bugged until 5 months later when it was re-released in May. Orange Guy released this video showcasing that there was zero footstep audio whilst you had the pickaxe out, and one player in particular noticed this, which was Metro. Since this gave him absolutely zero footstep audio, all he needed to do was just walk up behind players, whip out his pump shotgun and pick up super easy elims, which allowed him to actually win a solo cash cup. No competitive advantage to buying cosmetics, by the way. This was patched, of course, so don't go buying this. Chapter 2 also had what I would describe as probably the strangest bug of all time, and that is when the zone accidentally reversed. Now this bug is very difficult to explain, but essentially the storm visually moved much faster than it actually did, meaning on Benji's perspective here, it looked like he was in the storm, but he was actually taking 0 damage, so he wasn't. Then the zone started to move backwards into the place where it should properly be, and the rest of the game was just completely fine after that. I have never seen this bug happen. I've never seen it happen since then. I have no clue what went on here, so maybe it was just a random visual glitch at the time, but I guess we'll probably never know. Now, a lot of these glitches have just been unintentional, strange things that happen at the time. However, there are some exploits that players use very intentionally to gain themselves way more earnings. The worst of these, of course, is the ELO bug. Now, in open tournaments, you're placed in lobbies with players who are roughly around your points. So if everyone's on 0, you're all placed randomly with other players who are roughly on 0 points. If you're on 100 points, you'll be placed with players who are roughly around 100 points. This means that if you're doing bad, you'll be put into worse lobbies, and if you're doing good, you'll be put into better lobbies. However, with an ELO glitch, you can perform well and get loads and loads of points, but consistently be put into lobbies with horrible players, meaning it's much easier for you to gain more points, and the cycle repeats. Worst of all, this was rampant during the Winter Royale of Chapter 2 Season 1, which was a $21 million event with every single single round being open. And as you can see, just as an example, I'm blurring out the name because I'm not actually sure if this player did abuse the elo bug or not. Now, there were 3 days to this event. In the first day, the team we're looking at placed in the top around 9,000. In the second day, they placed around top 2,000. And then in the third day, they placed 9th. Now, I don't know about you, but as a top 9,000 to top 2,000-ish kind of player myself, there's not been a single tournament where I've just had a pop-off performance and somehow placed 9th. Overall, that's incredibly impressive. But what was more than likely going on here is that they were continually putting themselves into 0 or lower elo lobbies on that final day as they found out about the bug. Innocents and Agers, who won the event at the time, got a ton of accusations for cheating, but they did end up posting a clip which showed that they clearly did not intentionally do this bug, and you can very clearly see that they got backed out on 0 points and they were visibly confused about it. There were a bunch of people who did this intentionally though. All you needed to do was, once your game was over, you just needed to change your region to another region and then change it back, and you'd be put on 0 points, which meant that when you queued, you'd be put against horrible players over and over and over. The problem with the elo glitch is that it repeatedly happened throughout different seasons, and into season 7 there was a different method where in trios you would have one player back out right before the game ended, and for that player you didn't gain any points. So then you could queue into the next game on the lower points as if that game hadn't existed, and when the next game finished, all of those points would be added back up, so you could selectively elo glitch over and over again to get yourself into worse lobbies. Now, all of these have been patched, but there were players who genuinely earned thousands of dollars just because they knew about this glitch and other people didn't. And obviously this wasn't the only glitch that pro players were hiding. The north glitch, which allowed you to take any cone or floor when you were looking north, was popularized because Young Calc tweeted about it and showcased this to the world. But there were pro players who apparently knew about this for over 6 months before this tweet. The specifics of this were, as long as the compass at the top of your screen was somewhere between 315 and 44, you would guarantee that you could take a cone and a floor. Now, this tweet went public on the 20th of May, and Epic Games actually managed to patch this the next day. It does make you think about how many exploits or bugs that other pro players are using that they're just not telling you about. On a lighter note, I just thought this one was really funny. There was a bug in Chapter 2 where your pistol or SMG, basically any weapon that just used mini ammo, would just automatically just start to reload. Now, this didn't impact tournaments too much, but this was posted on the competitive Fortnite Reddit, and the original poster clearly did not understand this copy pasta, and it just made for a funny interaction that I wanted to share. But in Chapter 2, there was also a pretty serious bug, which was a queue bug. Now, if you've played in Chapter 5, the current chapter, you'll know there's a lot of queue bugs going on right now, but this is nothing new. Back in Chapter 2, the original queue bug just didn't allow anyone to queue into a tournament at all. And this actually delayed FNCS for a full week during Season 5. There's not much more to say on this. These are just annoying and they keep happening throughout every single season. But around 2 months later, an item duplication glitch was put into the game. Now, a new mechanic was added where you could throw consumable items, but this actually had a glitch where if you switched weapons and threw it at the same time, you would actually duplicate the item. Now, thankfully, this also did not happen in tournaments as it was patched out. However, there was clearly some other form of duplication glitch, as still random games would go down to heal-offs, where players would be in the storm with infinite floppers that they'd managed to duplicate somehow. There was also a random game where a player killed someone who had infinite crash pads, which were probably duplicated using the duplication glitch, but we'll probably never know what actually happened here. Now, speaking of throwables, cabbages have ruined one too many tournaments. Now, from the start of Chapter 2, pretty much all the way through to Chapter 4, if you loaded into creative before jumping into Battle Royale, the ability to gather a cabbage, corn, tomatoes, whatever the consumables would be, would just disappear. Now, this was really important because FNCS had just started to implement reboot rounds where if you won the game, you would qualify through to the grand finals. And a lot of players are doing this via heal-off, and taking things like cabbages and sweet corn was really integral to the strategy of winning. But if you just played creative beforehand, you'd have to restart your game before jumping into FNCS. This was not the only cabbage bug, as for some reason this chapter, Swizzy ate a cabbage and then just couldn't switch weapons at all. Watch out for those cabbages. Now, that bug was frustrating, but there was one bug that every single player loved. Maybe not every single player, every good player loved, and that was the drop reload bug. Now, all this bug was when you dropped your weapon, it would automatically reload. It wouldn't give you infinite ammo or anything like that. It would still use your ammo, but it would just immediately go back up to full. Highly skilled mechanical players could use this in the middle of a fight just to drop their weapons, pick it back up, and continue to move without wasting really any time spent reloading. You could also heal using big pots and whatever, drop all your weapons while you were doing that, and reload them at the same time, which again saved a bunch of time. This was patched out a month later, but a lot of players still say this was the best bug Fortnite has ever put in because it actually raised the skill gap. But more importantly, Apex Legends actually had this exact same bug 2 years later, so Fortnite does not steal everything from Apex. You can't talk about Chapter 2 bugs and exploits without speaking about cars. My goodness. Playing Chapter 2 competitive was so incredibly fun because of cars. Such great balanced mobility. They never sent you under the map. They never killed you to fall damage for no reason whatsoever. They were my favorite part of competitive Fortnite. My personal favorite is when you tried to get into a car and your camera would turn 90 degrees. These bugs terrorized competitive for season after season, even making Asian Jeff and Oliver OG not qualified to grand finals because in one of their games the car just randomly fell through the floor, killing all of their trio. I'm very happy to say that cars are no longer part of competitive Fortnite, not just because they're hard to balance, but also because I am so happy to never see these bugs again in a tournament. And of course, the final bug from Chapter 2 is the shadow floppers. Now, when you combine the shadow floppers low gravity effect with some form of other mobility, which was all around the map, this would send you miles into the sky, way higher than intended. This could cause you to basically do half of the map rotations, or you could simply just fly up into the sky and land on someone's head. This was probably the first season where the solo cash cup meta was cringe, where all you needed to do was carry shadow floppers and heals, find a launch pad, pop one, fire yourself up into the sky, dash as high as you could, and then once the shadow flopper time ended, which was after 60 seconds by the way, then you could just open your redeploy and just fly away up because you hit a launch pad. Now, you definitely didn't see me doing this. Wouldn't be me. Couldn't be caught doing that. Now, Chapter 3 didn't have as many bugs as the previous two chapters, mainly because it was shorter, and I've already mentioned most of them, but the mantle bug was something that repeatedly impacted tournaments over and over again. Now, sometimes when you would mantle over a ledge, it would give you a little forwards momentum, a little boost, but sometimes you did not want that if you were, for example, mantling onto an air balloon way up in the sky. Sometimes, rather than shooting you forward, it would just shoot you vertically up into the sky, causing you to die to fall damage. Now, this bug was incredibly frustrating, and it seemed like Epic Games could never fix it. However, once it kind of got under control, players managed to figure out ways to do this intentionally using a stair edit and then also using floor edits, which managed to make some pretty cool clips. But I think the main bug that actually impacted tournaments was the storm sickness bug. Now, I've already covered this in my Evolution of Heal-Off video, but essentially Vontrex and a bunch of other players figured out a way to get rid of storm sickness, which is essentially additional damage that hits you if you've taken a certain number of storm damage. And you could remove this just by dying and rebooting, so your storm sickness counter would restart again. This allowed heal-off players like Vontrex to stay alive in Storm forever, until they get banned, of course, because they were clearly exploiting. But Chapter 4 would bring a whole host of new bugs, starting with the ability to build through walls. Now, for many years, you could actually build through walls by crouch spamming and looking to the left, but at the start of Chapter 4, for some reason, something changed with the building grid where you were able just to look to the left and easily place many builds through a wall. This is something that a lot of players really liked because it added another skill level to being able to box fight and actually lasted in the game for 5 months before it was patched. Unfortunately, something that was not patched in that first season was the pickaxe audio. Now, during that first season, Epic had made some changes to the audio in the game, and it seemed like there were so many different parts of audio going off in an endgame with hammers, shots, pickaxes, and all of these other signs that some things just got drowned out, and unfortunately, that was pickaxe audio.
What?
So basically, in FNCS Grand Finals, there was 0 pickaxe audio when it came to endgame, which, as you'll see from Booga and Peterbot, who died to it here.
40.
Look, back zone, no.
Wait, one pump, what? Oh.
The main mobility item this season, which was the Shockwave Hammer, was also incredibly bugged. Now, you could cancel the animation just by placing a build immediately after you had used it. They then removed this, however you could drop the hammer to cancel the animation instead, which yet again became quite a skill gap, with some of the most mechanical players getting really good at this. You could also cancel the swing animation by jumping, and just before you hit the ground, right-clicking. This was used a ton at the start of the season for pre-edits. Now these were pretty much all patched, but one of the most frustrating bugs that came with the Shockwave Hammer was the slow run bug. As you can see, Muzz gets this in this first game of a solo cash cup, and he plays the entire game out just crawling around at this speed, and somehow manages to get 7 elims in 5th, which is pretty good. But every new season in Chapter 4 had a new mobility item, and unfortunately, the next season in Chapter 4 Season 2, the Kinetic Blade was also incredibly bugged. Around 2 months into the season, people realized that you could disconnect your internet whilst using the Kinetic Blade, go around and hit all of the opponents that were standing still, and then reconnect your internet, and the players would just instantly die. Now, disconnection bugs have actually gone into Fortnite a few times, as back in Chapter 2, players could disconnect their internet while they were jumping from the battle bus and just fly into the sky for the entire game and just claim a bunch of placement points. However, this bug with the Kinetic Blade made the item get removed from tournaments initially, but then it became such a huge problem in pubs and in ranked, they had to remove it altogether until the bug was fixed. And that's where the next strat comes in, which is the fly strat. Now this basically allowed you with the Kinetic Blade to fly straight up into the sky to reach max sky limit, where you could just fly for the rest of the game and play heal off when you landed. And this might look familiar to you if you've played a lot of Chapter 5, as this has been a massive problem for the whole chapter. This was particularly true with the Wings of Icarus in Chapter 5 Season 2. Now players were using this to exploit way up into the sky, so much so to the point that 21% of solo Cash Cup games had some form of Wings exploiter in it at the start of the season. Now, a player was banned for doing this during the Duo Cash Cup Opens, however, because they placed in the top 50, somehow they were able to get into the finals, where he continued to use this bug in the finals. There were so many problems with the Wings of Icarus that they had to be disabled from tournaments and only came back in the week prior to FNCS Grand Finals. Now, what a lot of players didn't realize is that when these were re-enabled, they actually secretly removed some of the fall damage you would get with it, meaning they were an incredibly viable item, and one of the only teams who noticed this was Swizzy and Vanyak, who won FNCS that season by utilizing the new strategies with the Wings, which nobody knew about. Of course, I have a full video on this. How can we talk about fly strats without talking about the Nitro Fists, as the exact same thing has happened this season, to the point where the Nitro Fists actually had to be completely disabled from tournaments, and now Epic's made the decision to completely keep them out of competitive altogether. I'm not going to complain, these things were hella busted even without this glitch anyway. But my personal favorite bug is when banned players were just allowed to queue into FNCS semi-finals. Mongrel and Mr. Savage failed to queue into this match along with 2 other pro teams, and instead 6 completely unknown random players were able to queue instead. Whilst Mongrel and Savage waited in the lobby, Male 2011 and King Usa hot dropped and immediately died in 50th place to Mikkel and Chexy, whereas the other 2 teams actually did okay. They landed relatively safely and got pretty decent loadout considering the lobby has some of the 50 best teams in the world in it. Of course, however, they did both die to Storm Surge as they failed to get enough damage, dying in 37th and 33rd place respectively. This technically means they actually did better than 17 total teams. You're probably wondering how they got in. Well, Epic Games, rather than making it just so that the 50 qualified teams could play, instead made it so that they could play, but also any teams banned from FNCS could also queue. Now, unfortunately, this zone was right on top of Mongrel and Mr. Savage's drop spot, so if they'd managed to get in, this could have actually been a really big game for them. But of course, everything in Fortnite is scripted, as the next game, Mongrel and Savage won and qualified to the Grand Finals. And Chapter 5 has a lot of annoying bugs, like the reload bug, where your gun would just randomly decide it needed to reload, similar to one of the other bugs we've talked about. The floor editing bug, where for some reason, still to this day, if you walk up to your floor, you'll edit a wall through it. And yeah, these impact tournaments, but nowhere near as much as the bug which randomly kicked you from a tournament match. This essentially happened to Thomas HD in FNCS Grand Finals, which meant that Queasy had to play the rest of the game as a solo. Now, in the overall leaderboard, they ended up placing 7th across the 2 days, but had he not been kicked out here, they could have gotten way more points and probably could have easily placed 5th, meaning this one disconnect probably cost them around $10,000 each. Funny enough to know, this bug actually was in the game all the way back in Chapter 2, as I found a clip of this happening to Andon. And of course, the funniest bug, in my opinion, which was the map bug in Chapter 5. If at any point during the game you decided to open your map, the game would crash and you would be kicked out. Many people's tournaments were ruined purely because they opened their map and they were just kicked out. So eventually what happened was people were unbinding their map throughout entire tournaments, and they never looked at it once to gain any information whatsoever because they feared their game would crash. What was so bad about this bug is that on the 31st of January, there was a tweet from Fortnite staff saying that this was fixed in a later update. Awesome. However, that later update was the 20th of February, meaning that FNCS Qualifier 1, 2, and the semi-finals were all played with this bug. Now, if you want to hear more about how these cringy, annoying heel-offs have progressed over the years, you can click this video on the left side of the screen, and if you want to see how the Wings of Icarus's secret buff managed to allow Swizzy and Vanyak to win FNCS, you can click the video on the right.